KidGab Bazaar. I graduate in about a week I'll graduate with the College of Science, and I've accepted a full-time job starting this January at the Dallas office of Data Solutions.
I'm Evan. I'll be graduating next May, and I have accepted a position with Facebook up in Seattle.
I'm Matthew Wesek, and I'll be graduating this semester, and I'll be continuing on as a graduate student here at Texas A&M.
And my name is Matthew Hegarty, and if all goes well, I'll be graduating in 8 days, and I've accepted a full-time offer with Szegedi in Austin. So our project is the KidGab Bazaar. So first of all, what is KidGab? The basic short definition is that it's a private social network for children created by Dr. Stephanie Valentine, and it's intended to provide an opportunity to study cyberbullying as well as promote healthy online interactions amongst its user base, which are currently Girl Scouts ages 7 to 12. So KidGab has an existing feature called the KidGab Mall, and it's basically a section of the site where users can spend their currency that they earn by doing things on the site called KidGab Coins in order to buy outfits for customizing their avatar. So our feature is the KidGab Bazaar, and basically it is a tool where users can create their own custom clothing, and they can also sell that clothing to other users, show it off to their friends, and purchase clothing from other users. And our overall goal is to support KidGab's mission of providing a way to study cyberbullying by increasing user engagement with the site and encouraging them to come back to the site and overall improving its stickiness. So our motivation for this is primarily to increase engagement and retention. Right now, KidGab has a lot of content, but once you've done a lot of it once, things like choose your own adventure stories have some replayability, but this gives users something else that they can do that's entirely user-generated content, which scales much better. And it also encourages self-expression. It allows users to actually design their own clothes and to show off their own personal style. And finally, it allows for increased opportunities for studying cyberbullying, because it provides yet another area where users can interact. So there's a lot of prior work on cyberbullying prevention, but very little of it is like KidGab. There's a lot of this that focuses on using guidelines for proper behavior, or in other ways, controlling the ways that people interact with online media. Very little of it focuses on actually reshaping online media in order to encourage healthier and more positive interactions. And so KidGab does that. There's also some research on how children understand and interact with virtual media, and a lot of this is focused on informing design. So we tried to incorporate that in the design of the Bazaar to create a site that children would actually want to use.
So there's also quite a bit of interesting scientific literature on avatar creation and customization. So for instance, allowing users to customize avatars helps foster immersion and user loyalty. Also, it turns out that hair modification is the most important feature that users request over and over again. So most of the time when people have avatar creators, they spend most of the time looking at the hair, modifying the hair, and they complain most about the lack of hair modification options. Unfortunately, we don't have that here, mostly just clothing, but that would be an interesting place to expand into. Audience is also important. So it is safe to assume that for children 11 and up, you can generally kind of design a site similar to how you would design a site for adults. You can kind of assume that they'll think similarly to you, but once you go below the age of 11, you start having to really make allowances and affordances for the younger children, because they're not going to, you can't assume that they're going to look at something and come to the same conclusion you do about what to click on to do something. But you also have to be careful, because if you make it too simple, users can also find it an affront to their intelligence if you kind of make it too toy-like. So there's a very delicate balance you have to strike between making sure that it's easy enough for younger users to use, but also not so simplified and in your face that they think it's, oh, this is for babies, and you think I'm an idiot. On to multiply. Yeah, thank you. So the project is somewhat multidisciplinary in that a big portion of it is studying child psychology within social networks and UI design for children. Our mentors, Emily Magnota was a Girl Scouts program coordinator, and Tahira Sada was a former assistant principal for Dobby Middle School. Hegarty here has some art experience, and Sarah also worked for a short time at an elementary school.
So, based on all of this, it can be said that the principal goal of the KidGab Bazaar is to globally and socially facilitate user interaction, foster healthy self-esteem, and allow for cyberbullying research. We allow for increased user interaction by having this avenue of being able to interact with the others in context of your own creations. You can create something, you can buy it and sell it. And we can increase interactivity with the site, and because of more interaction, we now have a new avenue to study interaction. We decided to realize our project in terms of 3 main objectives, which were manifested in our 3 main phases of the project. Phase 1, create the bazaar and clothing display. You can create your own stuff, you can show it to your friends, and you have a bazaar. Step 2 was implementation of the store system. You can buy and sell from your friends. And then finally, creation and management of features in a virtual economy. While an economy, by nature, economics is essentially, the science of decision making. So to some extent, this is going to be driven by the culture of the site, but we still had to consider some features to add in, like coin sinks, where we don't end up with a whole lot of artificial inflation.
So there were a fair number of challenges we faced in implementing this project. Probably one of the largest was understanding KidGab's existing code base. It's a fairly large site built on WordPress and BuddyPress, about 1.5 million lines of code. Most of that is not relevant to us, but we still had to integrate a lot of our features with existing site features like the mall and the KidGab coin systems. KidGab is written in 5 languages. It uses CSS, PHP, SQL, HTML, and JavaScript. None of us had experience with all of those languages, and most of us only had experiences with 1 or 2 of them. So we had a lot of learning to do in a relatively short time. And finally, UI design was a very big concern for us, because not only did we have to come up with something that kids would want to use, we also had to fit within the existing KidGab color scheme and basically site design principles. So we think we did that pretty well, and it looks like an integrated part of the site. So there were some ethical concerns with this. The primary ethical concern was how well does this support KidGab's mission of fostering positive interactions. It's entirely possible that someone could create an item and no one would want to buy it, and that's not really great for your self-esteem. So on the whole, there's a lot of balancing. Is it worth including this feature? Does the upsides for positive interaction and positive commentary outweigh the downsides? And we think that overall most of our features most definitely meet that criteria. Then additionally, there are potential developmental consequences. There's not really a ton of research yet on the impacts of highly interactive displays on young children, because they simply haven't been around long enough for us to truly understand it, as well as the potential self-esteem complications of monetizing their creations. So there were a lot of kind of murky waters to navigate here.
So some team structure, like Sarah said, she was the team lead. She kept us organized out of chaos. Then we split up into back end and front end. Myself and this Matt worked on the business logic, database management, and compatibility with existing code. The other Matt and Sarah worked on the front end mostly, with interaction design, UI design, event handling, and interfacing with that. And we both kind of reached into each other a little bit, but that's mostly what we split it up. Our mentor was Dr. Stephanie Valentine back there. She had her PhD here at XAM at the Department of Computer Science and Engineering. She's the creator of KidGab, and she's currently an assistant research scientist at the Sketch Recognition Lab. So I'm going to show you a demo of the site, so you can get a better understanding of what's going on. So here you can see basically all my creations. This is my own profile. You go into my bazaar, and you have my creations on my bazaar. Here are my creations. They're not too great, but all right. You can see that we have the option to make them private or visible to all your friends. So make all visible to my friends, all visible only to me, and then also in here, you can either make it private or for the private ones, they have a little key here, or you can make it public, whereas bazaar. So first, I'll show you kind of creating a masterpiece. So here you can see you have a little template here, like this little outfit here, or you can go with this outfit here, and you also have some accessories, like a crown and guitar, stuff like that. So something really simple. You can make the background green, and we'll just make polka dots or something. Just throw these on here. This always looks nice when you have the mouse, but yeah. And then when you're done, you'll see your creation, and you'll see that you can create 25 coins, and then you own your own copy. So do that, create. And you have successfully created something. You can see here, it's automatically public, but you can make it private if you want. And then if you want to add it to your bazaar, click Add Bazaar. It'll ask you how many coins to charge. So it costs 25. We think it's a pretty good creation, so we'll make it 40. And we'll sell 20 of them. So we get this little message saying that you created you're adding 20 creations, each costing 40. So every time someone purchases one, you'll get a profit of 15 coins. you to your bazaar. I could just click the tab or just put it over directly. And this is all the stuff I already have in my bazaar that I'm selling. So here's my, I just put this in here for 20 or for 40 coins, and there's 20 available. I can change the price, I can change the amount, I can move all. So if I was like, you know, a lot of people are buying this, make it a little more expensive, it's 50. So that's that. So another part, obviously, you're only seeing me as myself doing it, but I can go buy it from other people. So Matt here's got some pretty cool creations in his, so I can go his. He's got a nice abstract piece of clothing here that I can buy. So I can purchase this here, and I've successfully purchased the item. And so things you can first. Basically, when you create or if you purchase, it will actually post to your wall so your friends can see what you've done. So you can see I just bought this super awesome outfit at Matt's Bazaar. And then also earlier when I created it, it shows that I just created something awesome, and you can do it too by going to yours. The other thing that we had to make compatible was an avatar, obviously. And so go to my avatar and see my creation, both the creations I made and the stuff I bought are here. So, a new polka dot outfit right here. Just put that on if we want. Or where's Matt's sweet outfit? Right there, and then I can wear that if I want. That's a little demo of what you can do on the website.
So I think you already touched on this once, but the implementation, PHP, SQL, JavaScript, HTML, CSS, and WordPress and BuddyPress provide all the social networking features of the site, and the KidGab Bazaar is actually a WordPress plugin, which makes the whole thing a bit more convenient, so it can be switched on and off at will. So if when it goes live on the actual KidGab site, if it's causing some kind of problems, the whole plugin can just be disabled and will disappear and be back to the way it was before we were messing with it. So functionality for the back end, we basically handle all the business logic. So when you purchase something, we have to check to make sure you have enough coins, update the coins, update all the databases to make sure that you have the item, make sure there's enough items to purchase, all that kind of stuff. And we basically abstract all the functionality for the front end. So the front end just calls a PHP call and makes it way easier for them. And sometimes we have to interact with other plugins in KidGab. So for example, the coins are a plugin, a WordPress plugin as well. So to make sure that we didn't make a dependency, we use WordPress filters. So if our plugin is disabled, the filter just gives it certain kinds of default information, and so it continues on without our plugin, no problem. And if we switch our plugin on, then it can interact with the coins. So the WordPress filters are really useful to kind of allow us to talk to other plugins without making them dependent on our plugin being enabled. The backend, the database was kind of object-oriented, so there's already quite a few tables from, say, the KidGab Mall and the coins and such. So what we did is we made it as if it were a mall item. So the KidGab Mall code, when it sees it, or the avatar creator, when it sees it, it can kind of treat it as if it were a normal mall item. And then we have another additional table that we have for ourselves to have any additional information we may need. And we use transactions for atomic SQL queries. So when we mess with multiple tables, either all the queries go through or none of them go through. So you can never have a partial query where it's, say, in the mall table, but not in our table and cause any kind of complications.
So when it comes to front end, we went in a few different steps. We broke it down into a couple of different things. We had to consider the interaction design. So when it came down to how we planned everything out, we did all of our planning and our mock-ups using Photoshop and Illustrator. Interaction design and implementation, all that was with JavaScript jQuery. When it came down to front end, we did the creations, and we did the bazaar. So within the creations, we had to put those interactions of creating an item, managing the privacy of the items, and then being able to add them to the bazaar. There was also a series of steps, like a control flow, a sequence of steps to add to the bazaar in order to make it intuitive, to make it easy and to keep any problems from happening in adding to the bazaar. Once you're in the bazaar, you're pretty much just wanting to sell your items. So when you think about the behaviors, the desired behaviors within the bazaar, you really want to think about, okay, I just want to change the price or I want to change the quantity. Maybe I want to remove the bazaar. Maybe I don't want a bazaar at all. I should be able to toggle it on or toggle it off. You should also be able to, so you should be able to remove all of a particular item from the bazaar. And then just some simple things with the WordPress and BuddyPress profile tab and subnab. That was actually it was an interesting thing since none of us had experience in with that particular technology, so that was a separate thing. We had to make sure we had a bazaar tab on the profile, as you guys saw, and then in the bazaar tab you had your specific bazaar and your creations. So when it comes down to adding to the bazaar, this is pretty much the desired set of behaviors you see in this finite state automaton. You start with your initial view of the item. You can click on it and you can set the price. If there's an issue with the price, you should not be able to advance to the next step. You should stay kind of in that state. This is the desired set of behaviors that will take you to the accept state, and if you click elsewhere, it will restart you. This said, we also enabled moving back between those states, between set price, set quantity, and confirm, just in case you happen to change your mind. And then when editing in Bazaar, it's a little more complicated just because you should be able to restart at different points. You're not necessarily following a series of steps. Just because you want to change the price doesn't necessarily mean you want to change the amount that's there, and you might want to just take everything out altogether. So it's just 3 separate behaviors. It's change the price, change the quantity, remove all, or have the option to start over. And then those are the ways you get. You can either start over or take only one of those actions to get to that accept state. So the overall accepted behaviors is we have that initial create behavior, as you guys saw, then the sequence of behaviors in the creations, the sequence of behaviors in creations that will add to the bazaar, and the sequence of creations that will change things within the bazaar. So in general, just the detail, as mentioned before, we used Illustrator and Photoshop for mockups. We made a lot of based on, in order to stay with the existing look and feel and aesthetic of the KidGab site, we took a lot of screenshots and made some designs for what we wanted it to look like using Illustrator and Photoshop. In terms of generating the actual views of the page, we used PHP, and then when it came down to the interactions, a lot of JavaScript and a lot of jQuery. And then when it came down to posting something to the database, we had to use a lot of Ajax, which WordPress has some separate handlers for Ajax, so that was definitely very useful.
So for testing, the backend did unit testing, some each of our functions, all the business logic, and the front end did manual testing and user testing. Just as we went along, we would just try out the websites if it worked, and then when we did our evaluations, the users were very helpful in understanding, certain bugs that we didn't see, or maybe something wasn't as descriptive as it needed to be. That helped a lot there. So when we got to evaluation, we asked a couple of questions. So as you can see, like the first one was about frustration, it's very low, and then the rest of them were about intuitiveness, enjoyability, and basically the ease of each of our functions. So overall, around the 8, 9 area, some close to 10 about enjoyability, intuitiveness, and ease of use. The one that was a little low was creating an item. If you remember while I was creating, there isn't much text there, so while there's a lot of little icons, sometimes people's a little confusing what did what. So it wasn't quite as easy as we wanted it to be. Other questions we asked were something like, why would you use it? And then also, if they like the name Bazaar. Mostly people want to make money. And after that, it was making stuff for the avatar, and then also liking to draw. For the most part, people like the name Bazaar. But we also got some other answers such as shop and exchange and market square. So what's next? Like any website, UI improvements could be made. We also have additional functionality that we were thinking of, stuff like letting kids put stuff up, let them have sales, and also putting stuff for a limited time. Only maybe till Saturday, this outfit is available. After that, it's gone. And also requiring upfront purchase of items. If you, for now, we have it so that you can put like 10 of them in your shop, but it doesn't charge you for 10 of them. It just whenever someone buys it, the quantity goes down and you get the profit. But if we want it to be more real world, a little more harsh, we can make it, if they want to put 10, they have to buy all 10 and put it on there and hope that they get bought. There's also a lot of research questions we can ask, so like, do children primarily create outfits for themselves, or to sell or share? Why do they do it? And was our whole long-term appeal? Also, we found there's a lot of research on adults and online behavior, or adults with shopping trends, but there's very, very little for children, so a lot can go towards those questions. So, as a conclusion, KidGab's focus is on cyberbullying research and to promote healthy online interactions. The KidGab Bazaar helps indirectly through increased stickiness and by new means of interaction to study. Overall, people liked the KidGab Bazaar. They thought it was easy and enjoyable to use. They liked the name Bazaar, and they were mostly use it to make money by customizing the avatar and interest in drawing. I'd like to thank Dr. Stephanie Valentine for the mentoring, all the help she gave us this semester. I'd also like to thank Dr. Hammond and Raniero for all the support and direction during this project. And then lastly, Emily for providing feedback on KidGab from the Girl Scouts. Any questions?
So what was your biggest challenge in developing in WordPress, your plugin?
The learning curve would be number one.
If you had, so you built it in WordPress because you were building in the ecosystem of KidGab, I assume. If you didn't have that constraint, would you have used WordPress? Would you use something different?
I'm not sure. We might have looked into different technologies, but since we were since we got access to the KidGab system, it was a lot of choices were already made. It was just, well, we're doing it this way because that's the way the site is made. It had to be in PHP, it had to be WordPress, and out of deference to Dr. Valentine, it was a plugin, so it could be switched off. And we used WordPress filters as well, so that it wouldn't interfere with Dr. Valentine's research if something went horribly wrong, she could switch it off. So a lot of design decisions were already kind of baked in the fact that we were coming into a pre-existing project.
And I think WordPress, it's a very well-known, reputable framework. It has a lot of features as a content management service. It does a lot. And then this ability to use some of the existing WordPress features to make it seem to look like a kid-friendly version of a Twitter or Facebook. I think to the end of KidGab's goal, I think WordPress was probably the ideal choice. This said, it is also probably the most well-known of the options that were available, so that also probably has something to do with why I personally would have picked it if I were to have started this myself.
Yeah, so, I mean, yeah, WordPress is great, and I get it in the constraints, right? I'm trying to think about it from the perspective of your capstone project, right? And the embodiment of your time here at A&M, and yet most of the design decisions have been made for you. So where, given that, where do you feel like you had an ability to make design decisions and demonstrate your capabilities after your time here at A&M?
So a big thing was, well, a big part of any real-world project is you're usually not starting from scratch. So that alone, I think, was beneficial that we started from the existing project. But we still have to make internal decisions. For example, how much of Dr. Valentine's code would we interact with? For instance, there was a discussion early on in the back end whether or not we completely silo our objects and have our own table, that everything we interact with our own, we wouldn't interact with any other tables, would make things simpler. Or did we want to kind of co-opt some of the pre-existing mall code to make things easier so we wouldn't have to rewrite a whole bunch of stuff from scratch? So one of the design decisions, we were originally leaning towards having our own little table, but then later we thought, well, we could probably use the pre-existing tables, make the mall code think that this is a pre-existing mall item, have it run normally, and then just slip in our own little pieces where we needed to kind of make everything run smoothly. So that's why we've only got one table that has a little bit of additional information that we need, and WordPress filters to kind of slip things into the other plugins as necessary. So there were some design decisions as to how much we wanted to interact with different pieces of the site, and whether or not we wanted to let a piece of the site that already exists do stuff and slip things in with filters, or if we wanted to keep it in our own little plugin.
So just one follow-on question, and then so given that, what were the factors that you were considering on option A or option B? How did you make your decision?
So the thing that swayed us eventually was the drive principle, don't repeat yourself. So we figured that maybe it might have made things a little bit easier at first to just, I'm not going to worry about how that works. We'll just write it ourselves. But then we'd have, for example, we were worried that we might have two different places where purchasing happens, and if there's a bug in one, and not the other, or we figured that it might be better to just use pre-existing code that had already gone through a lot of bug fixing, that had already been pretty solid, and just slip our own things in with filters, as opposed to just rewriting a whole bunch of business logic from scratch. So that did make some things difficult, like the avatar creator. There were a lot of subtle bugs that we had to work out, but overall I think it was probably better to use pre-existing avatar creator and slip in our own key pieces where necessary, as opposed to rewriting all of that code from scratch.
That, and also, this idea of don't repeat yourself if there's something there. This is a site that's being actively used by Girl Scouts right now. We want to make sure that, yes, in theory, we could have, done a lot of things from scratch, but we also want to make sure that this works and that this is still, the things on the site are still able to work after this particular feature is rolled out to the Girl Scouts. We had to consider it sort of like a moving target, so.
So is this feature rolled out on the site, or is there a plan to roll it out?
Not quite yet, but Dr. Valentine has intentions to roll it out once she's confident that it isn't going to break everything and destroy all her hard work. Thank you.